used against me in the media. They've created this fantasy monster image, and it's been going on for the last 12 years. And I've ever had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason that they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that garbage, and they painted this image of me that like I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
John Wayne Gacy, a name that still sends chills down the spines of Americans. He was a respected community member, a successful businessman, and even a part-time clown. But beneath the painted smile was a predator, one of the most sadistic serial killers in U.S. history. This is the chilling story of the man known as the Killer Clown, from childhood to capture, and the horrors he left behind. Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. His childhood was far from happy. His father, an alcoholic and World War I veteran, was both physically and verbally abusive. Despite his efforts to win his father's approval, young Gacy was constantly criticized and beaten. He also suffered from a heart condition that left him weak and often sidelined in school activities. This led to isolation and bullying, and while Gacy longed for affection and acceptance, he instead learned how to hide his pain behind a carefully constructed mask. As he entered adulthood, Gacy seemed to be turning his life around. In his early 20s, he married and moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where he managed several KFC restaurants owned by his father-in-law. He became active in the local Jaycees, a civic organization, and was even named Man of the Year. But underneath this respectable exterior, a darker side was brewing. In 1968, he was convicted of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but served just 18 months before being released on parole. His wife divorced him during his time in prison, and upon release, he returned to Chicago to start over. Gacy opened a construction business, and by outward appearances, he was a success. He became involved in local politics, held parties for his neighbors, and even performed as a clown named Pogo at charity events and children's hospitals. But behind closed doors, his violent urges had returned, and they were escalating. In 1972, Gacy committed his first known murder. It wouldn't be his last. Over the next 6 years, he lured dozens of young men and teenage boys into his home. Some were runaways, others were looking for work. Gacy often promised them jobs with his company or tricked them by impersonating a police officer. Once inside his modest home in Norwood Park, the trap was set. Gacy would often handcuff his victims under the pretense of a magic trick. Sometimes he was even dressed as Pogo. He then assaulted them, tortured them, and strangled them, usually with a makeshift tourniquet made of rope. He called it his rope trick. When the deed was done, he hid their bodies in the crawl space beneath his house. For years, neighbors complained about the strange smells coming from his home. Gacy blamed moisture or dead rodents, but in reality, it was the stench of death. Despite the horrors happening inside his house, Gacy continued to live a seemingly normal life. He hosted barbecues, attended political functions, and maintained a friendly relationship with his neighbors. He was even photographed with the First Lady, Rosalind Carter. No one suspected the monster hiding in plain sight. By 1975, his crawl space was nearly full. Eventually, he began dumping bodies in the Des Plaines River. Everything began to unravel in December 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Piest disappeared after telling his mother he was going to meet a man about a job. That man was John Wayne Gacy. When questioned by police, Gacy denied any involvement, but inconsistencies in his story raised suspicion. Authorities began surveillance and soon secured a search warrant for his home. What they found was disturbing: wallets, IDs, and clothing belonging to several missing boys. A second search warrant revealed the full extent of the horror. Investigators began excavating the crawl space and unearthed the first of many bodies. Over the following weeks, 29 victims were recovered from beneath the house. 4 more were found in nearby rivers. Some were never identified. Gacy eventually confessed to the murders, describing them in cold, clinical detail. He claimed to have committed over 30 killings and referred to his victims as things, not people. In his warped view, he believed he was cleaning up the streets. The public was horrified. On December 21, 1978, John Wayne Gacy was officially arrested. His trial began in early 1980. He was charged with 33 counts of murder, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. His defense team argued insanity, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to death. Gacy spent 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center. During that time, he painted hundreds of pieces of art, many of which featured clowns or dark surreal imagery. Some were sold at auction, others were burned in protest by victims' families. He gave interviews, showed little remorse, and continued to portray himself as a victim of circumstance. But the world had already seen behind the mask.